Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2. So we've got a very exciting panel discussion this morning, and thank you so much to all our panellists this morning. We've had a last-minute change. Angela Hope could not make it this morning, so in her place is Kate Morrison, who I'll be introducing just before she speaks. So this morning we've got 5 panellists, and then we'll have time for Q&A at the end. And yes, enjoy this discussion. Okay, first up, we've got Peter Derbyshire. Is the Director of Policy and Government Relations for the Australian Academy of Technology and Engineering. In this role, Peter leads the policy and advocacy strategy for the Academy, which is focused on a technology-driven, human-centred future. Prior to this, Peter worked at Science and Technology Australia as the Policy and Program Manager, where he led the policy and advocacy of STA. While here, he also developed the Science and Technology Australia STEM Ambassador Program. Peter comes from a science background with a degree in zoology from UWA, where he worked on reptile cardiac function. Thank you, Peter. So you've got...
That's already on. That's fantastic. Thank you very much for that.
That's okay. No, do you have slides? I can't remember.
No slides. I was not that well organised, unfortunately. But I figured, people get enough PowerPoint presentations, and I won't talk long because we have such an illustrious panel to follow. Anyway, so basically, the introduction was a fantastic one. It gives an idea about where I come from, and what I'm here to talk to you a bit about today is sort of a national skills taxonomy. Now, yesterday we were talking a great deal at length of the importance of skills training and things like that. But we at the Academy of Technological Sciences and Engineering, ATSE for short, because no one should ever have to repeat that name too often. It'll, you'll lose your breath before you finish it. Last year we looked at STEM skills across the board. Our fellows, which are 900 of the preeminent technologists and engineers and mathematicians, looked at it and went, we've got a bit of a skills shortage coming. This was at the end of 2021, 2022, all we talked about was skill shortages, so at least they got that right. And one of the things that they really focused on was the need for actually understanding what it is we are lacking. Because when we talk about skill shortages, we hear all the time about, we've got a shortage of engineers, and we've got a shortage of technologists, and we've got a shortage of this and that. But what does that actually mean when it comes down to actually trying to train things? Especially when we're talking about a workforce that is changing. When we're not going to have as many people working in coal mines, but does that mean we're going to have more people working in critical minerals mining? We're not going to have that many people working in service providing in supermarkets, but does that mean we're going to have more people working under supervising robots in warehouses? The skills are changing. So what we need is a way to talk about skills in a nice, clear way that industry, that educators and trainers like yourself, and that people who are undergoing the training can actually talk about their skills in a way that sort of cuts across things. The other thing that our technologist pointed out was that these days anyone with any basic knowledge in things like Python will call themselves a machine learning expert. What does that actually mean? We don't really know. Digital skills is particularly challenging because the minute you develop a skills taxonomy, it's out of date, especially if it's going to be a national one, especially if it's going to be driven by government, go through all of those processes, regulatory authorities, all the fun stuff. It's out of date. So we developed this report, which has a number of recommendations. The fun one, probably the least sexy recommendation was, needing a national adaptable skills taxonomy. I didn't think anyone would be particularly interested in that. Turns out everyone's interested in that. Brendan O'Connor, the Minister for Skills, said to us, we're really keen for someone to raise this. We didn't think anyone would do that. It's not sexy. And I thought, well, we're a learned academy. Not sexy is what we do. That's a joke. And please don't tell my boss I ever said that. She'll come after me. So what we did was then go out to a group of people and throughout the sector, the Digital Skills Office, the Council of Independent Education, which is all the TAFE and Independent Skills, Universities Australia, the people who are now setting up Jobs and Skills Australia, even at state level, so the Jobs Precinct down in Victoria. And you know what I found out? Everyone's developing a skills taxonomy. Yep, and I can see a few eye rolls there thinking, and I thought the same thing. It's just like, oh, good. So the problem is not that we're not going to have a skills taxonomy. The problem is we're going to have 20. And nothing is probably going to be worse than having 20 skills taxonomies. So I come from a biology background. What I want to see in a skills taxonomy is exactly what you would see in a biological taxonomy. It's a common language with which we can talk to skills. Now, a biological taxonomy isn't a stationary thing. It changes all the time. Nothing more so than when we discovered genomics and DNA and managed to check to make sure species actually belong where they were, and everything has shifted and taxonomies have to shift as they go. The best approach we've seen so far comes from the Jobs Precinct down in Victoria, which are actually using machine learning techniques to develop a taxonomy. Now, I thought to myself, machine learning is only as good as the algorithms and the data that gets fed into it. But if you develop something that is regularly updated and things like this, you could actually have a taxonomy where we develop a framework from which it sits, a series of rules like we do in biology, and then let the machine learning go through the CCADs and the university qualification standards and all of those things and develops a taxonomy for us that we can put across the world. Now, this is important because me as a policymaker, I think a skills taxonomy is important. I can't do policy without being able to talk about skills, but I'm also not the person it should actually be designed for. What it should be designed for are the students who come out of our universities and TAFEs so that they know what skills they actually have, because the number of PhD students I speak to who come out of their PhD and go, I'm a reptile cardiac biologist, that's all I know. I'm like, no, you're a project manager and you're a budget manager and you're a problem solver and you've got analytical skills and you've developed all these things, but you're so blinkered that you don't know these things. And universities aren't always particularly good at telling students that these are the skills you've developed. They have the list of skills that you get at it, but at the end of your PhD, you're just more happy that you finished your PhD and survived the process than ever looking at what skills you've developed. And industry is also, as much as we do represent as ATSI industry representatives, industry also needs a better way of talking about skills. Because every industry leader I talk to will tell me, and I'm sorry for everyone who was at the cidery last night and has heard me wax lyrical about this already, but every industry leader I speak to will tell you that they want people who don't necessarily have an understanding of this program language or that program language. They want problem-solving skills and they want critical thinking and they want adaptability and flexibility, which is great. But any student who put those as their skills and didn't say, hey, I know Python, probably isn't getting their resume even looked at or an interview. So somewhere in industry itself, there's a bit of a skills disconnect. Now, this is also important, and I know we're all in here talking about research skills, which is what I'm trying to keep my focus on. But when I talk about skills taxonomy, I'm talking about across the board. Because as we've seen earlier this year, and as my policy team tried to discover while I was on leave for 2 weeks, ChatGPT actually writes really good policy. Which I told them that this means they have to write better policy, otherwise I'll replace them, because if an AI can do it, then why would I need them? Which, you know, made them think a bit harder about not putting forward motherhood statements and big general ideas that can't actually be applied, because that's what AI does. We need those personal, human, social skills. We need to put the A into STEM and call it STEAM or whatever we want to call it as an acronym. I personally hate STEM as an acronym. I hate them all like that. But so we need that skills taxonomy to be across the board. So what we're doing to do that is, in true academy fashion, is bringing everyone together in a couple of weeks, including people from the ARDC and people from Jobs and Skills Australia and from the Digital Skills Office, and sort of doing the whole, we're going to sit you all in a room right now and we're going to show you what each of you are talking about, because we've spoken to all of you, and let's try and pull something together. Because it's not just, my final example is, it's not just an important Australian thing. We highlighted this to the Council of Academies of Engineering, Technology and Sciences, so the acronyms, they're plenty, which is an international body. And they all looked at it and went, this is fantastic. This is a great idea. Why don't we have something like this? Why don't we have an international one? I thought that's a great idea as well, because if I look back at our own home affairs, when they bring people in and their skills, I have a policy analyst who has an economics degree. Thank you. Now, everyone in this room probably knows an economist is probably useful in a policy team, right? Yeah, someone who can understand the economy, how return on investment works, things like that. Apparently, the Department of Home Affairs are of the opinion that he's not using his economics degree because his job title is policy analyst. Now, that tells me that even our own international migration problems come from the fact that our own departments don't understand skills taxonomies. So this is sort of where we're pushing, where we're driving. We're hoping at some point the government will look at what we're doing and go, let's do this nationally, and we'll develop something that is a quicker, more agile more useful thing that can be used across Australia, and then who knows, we can peddle it out to the world. It can be a uniquely Australian invention, but that's where we're heading at the moment.
Thank you, Peter. Great. Our next speaker is Anthony Beitz, who is the Program Leader of Scientific Computing within the Department of Defence. In this role, he leads the delivery and support of digital research infrastructure for Defence and its strategic partners. He has been with Defence since February 2016 and has significantly grown its capabilities in e-research to enable and accelerate Defence scientific discovery. His previous roles include Director of E-Research at the University of Cape Town, General Manager of Monash University's E-Research Centre, and Principal Researcher at Telstra's Research Labs. Thank you, Anthony.
Thanks, Doris.
I've
got some slides.
Yeah, your slides should come up. Thank you.
So, while waiting for the slides, so I'm basically here as a user of a skills framework for the last 8 years. It's been an amazing journey for us, and I think 8 years has really sort of shown that it's around and it's going to stay with us for quite some time to come. I want to give you an introduction quickly to Sophia, the skills framework for the information age. Peter was talking about something having really broad. This is digital, but as I talk about it, you'll see it's actually got more broader applications. It won't cover everything, but it's well on its way, and it is an international standard. And as I said, I'll give you a quick introduction. Next slide, please. So it's a common language to describe capabilities, but also to align your organisational's workforce to delivering outcomes for your business. And it's been around for quite some time. It came out of the UK in the year 2000. We started picking it up soon after in Australia, and basically 2010 the Australian Public Service basically picked it up and started to use it. As I said, for our journey in DSTG it was from 2015. Really amazing journey. I'll try and give you a bit of an idea of how that sort of went, but it's now licensed across Australia. So there's an Australian license, so Australian companies, organisations can use it freely. So there's been great adoption by it, not just in the government, but outside by other companies as well, including companies like Woolworths. I think that covers it. And used by over 200 countries. And the current version is version 8. So it's been around for some time and it's gone through quite a few iterations. Next slide, please. Right. This one. Bang. Awesome. Now, it is quite broad. There's a number of categories. You can sort of see them coloured, but within inside of those categories, they cover 121 different skills. So it's quite broad in its nature. Each skill most skills go up to potentially 7 levels, and you can sort of see they start very simply with follow, assist, all the way up to setting strategic aspects of a business. Now, not all the skills go to those particular levels. How do they assess each of those particular skills? They're looking at things like the influence somebody might have. How do they, autonomy within inside of a business? What's the complexity of that particular skill? What business skills are required? And what knowledge is required? So there's a lot of thought that actually goes into each of the skills. The other thing, as I mentioned before, it's actually been growing and developing and iterating. And I know when we started our journey, we were looking at it saying, look, we're trying to do research and ICT and in between. It doesn't cover a number of things. And we've been working with our partner, the Australian Computing Society. We're privileged to have Lisa Sirik, in the front row here, who's a guru in all things Sophia. I'm not worthy of being in her presence. But with that, it's been a fantastic relationship. We've actually worked with them to change the international standards. And the current standard, which is Sophia 8, now has high-performance computing, machine learning, data engineering, scientific modelling, numerical analysis. Well, actually, a previous version, we worked with them to put in data management. So all those sorts of things that are important to us in our space in e-research are now there. And if there's things that we need to bring in future, we can actually work with body like the Australian Computing Society to basically make it happen. Next slide. So, trying to make it real, what does this look like? And I don't have much time, so I'm trying to give you an idea of a couple of positions we might have in the e-research space. So a data engineer, what might a data engineer skills look like? And these are skills directly from Sophia, things like data engineering, data management, which I mentioned before, requirements definition, programming potentially, data modeling, etc. All those things are coming in, they're already there. And others are starting to describe their skills in the same sort of way in other organisations, not just with inside a Department of Defence. Going down to the next one, computational scientists, which is growing in importance, and I'm trying to grow the market with inside of Australia in that space because we just don't have enough of them. So describing that as things like scientific modelling, numerical analysis, etc., research, all those things that are really important there are starting to be described. Each of those can be described at a different level depending on the position. You might have a junior position, you may have a senior position. So each of those can take slightly different shapes and sizes, so to speak. So you get an idea now that it is quite applicable. The research space can be easily applied. So how are we using Sophia with inside of DSTG? What are the sort of things we use it for? Well, we use it for organisational development. When I describe my organisation, how do I describe my positions? What do they look like? And I've got the building blocks to describe it. It's very easy to do that. I go through, I describe it as such. With that information, I can also identify the skills gaps that I've got in my organisation, or where am I strong in, and then I can address each either way. So it's really useful for making those sorts of decisions. I can use it in recruitment. So when I recruit for single positions, I actually describe the Sophia profile that I need as part of it, and I can advertise it as such. I can also, because I know all the Sophia profiles of all the staff internal inside of my area, I can also say maybe that person should apply for that job. You're not very different, or it's not much of a stretch. So it's really useful from that sort of perspective. Also with shortlisting, if people actually have a Sophia profile in the marketplace, and that is growing, thanks to ACS and other groups like that, I can actually look at their profile and say, yep, you're exactly what I want. It gives me confidence in those sorts of selections. Succession planning, when I'm actually looking at who's the next person that's going to take my job, I can actually see who's got similar sorts of capabilities, and then I can grow them with their performance reviews and develop them into those particular positions. Professional development, each of our staff now have the ability of looking at their own profile. We actually use a tool called My Sophia, provided by ACS, and the staff basically put in their own profile and they can develop that, and they can see what it is, and they can talk to their manager around that. So they can actually see and have those career sorts of decisions and see where they're actually going with their career. And this is part of the journey. When we started with Sophia, our staff weren't interested in their career as much. Now they can see where they're going. They've got the elemental building blocks. They can have those discussions with their management and talk about courses that they need to go on to actually progress to those higher levels. It's fantastic to see it. You've got staff that are more interested in their work, whereas at the start we didn't have that. We also, we talked about an example just before. We had librarians when they first came into Sophia, they were like, this isn't for them. This is for IT people, not for librarians. But when we started to work with them and started to show them, they could see, yes, this is exactly what librarians need as well. And an example that we had, one person moving from one space to another, they were a librarian and they were interested in moving to another area. They're now an architect in the HPC space, cloud engineering, etc., and they're loving it. And it was because they had competencies that could actually easily translate, and we could grow them into that particular space. And we can identify the skills goals that they need, but also the training. If we know that there's a gap where they need to mature in their particular skills capability, we can say this course is for you, and this will take you to the next level. And that leads on to something we did about 3 years ago. We actually radically transformed the organisation. We said, this isn't what we need to do for defence, to push defence research. We need to reorganise it. We did a major overhaul of our organisation. So we took all our current skills and looked at what are the new skills and capabilities and that we needed. Came up with a whole new set of positions. And we could have said, look, we're just going to go higher into those new positions. But because we had Sophia profiles of our existing staff, and they had loyalty to defence, they had really good backgrounds, they could work with researchers and that, we said, no, we're going to train them into these new areas. And with Sophia, we could see the skills gaps and we can help them on that journey of training into that new position. And that's been a fantastic journey and it's been very successful. Also, organisational resilience. So think about your organisation. Every now and then, for most of us, we don't have enough staff, someone disappears. Who's going to fill that person's role? With Sophia, we can actually go and see who's close to that position, and then they can go and fill that position. Or job mobility, we can actually see that certain people have similar sorts of competencies. We can actually easily move them around without too much change in our organisation, and they can grow their skills in other areas, and that produces resilience within inside of an organisation. It also builds the organisation because they start to understand what each other do better. And as I said, fantastic partnership with Sophia in ACS. So how else might we be able to use it? I've just given you an idea of how we're using it at the moment with inside of DSTG. Well, career pathways, because you can sort of see what the components are. You can sort of see what a person's skill is. You can potentially see how they might move up through the organisation, through one position to another. So you can sort of start mapping. That makes it easy. Also, I mentioned facilitating that job mobility. That's really something we want to push further into the future. The other thing is, and many of you know, is there's not enough e-research staff within inside the job market. How do we grow it? So if we can start describing these things in very fundamental ways, I think we'll actually bring more people into that space. Also developing an e-research profession. I know within my organisation that they know that my area, it's partway between research and IT, but they don't know how to describe it. So we are working with our HR group to actually develop that and describe it right now. And that's good for us because our organisation knows exactly how to work with us in that space. And collaboration. If all of us start to have a common framework, we can actually start moving people, getting them working together much more easily, and that collaboration. And what's important, I know in DSTG, is how do we scale and do more things together. So once again, dear to our heart in DSTG. That's it from me. Thank you very much.
There we go. Great, thank you, Anthony. Our next speaker is Kate Morrison. Kate is the Director of the Australian Skills Classification Team, which is responsible for the development, publication and maintenance of the Australian Skills Classification. The ASC is a common language of skills used to identify the specialist tasks, core competencies and technology tools associated with occupations in the Australian labour market. She has more than a decade experience working in the employment and skills portfolios for the Australian government. Thanks, Kate.
I will try and do this without a hint of irony after Peter's very good first panel session. This will be great. So thank you so much for having me. Oh, sorry, is this in the right spot? Is that better? Sorry. Thank you so much for having me. Angela Hope, my boss, was supposed to be here. She does send her apologies, so I hope to be an appropriate substitute. So I'm from Jobs and Skills Australia. We were established in November last year, and part of our key remit is to provide evidence-based advice on Australia's skills needs and the adequacy of our skills system to meet those needs. We are the domestic skills system branch, and I think it's really important that system is a singular there, because what we are really thinking about is how do we harmonise our tertiary sectors to improve performance for job seekers and for our students. So key to that for us is curriculum mapping within our branch, and we are mapping our curriculum through VET and the higher education systems to a common skills language, so we can try and understand the skills that are taught in both of those sectors, the transferability of those skills across those sectors, and how they actually play out in occupations across the labour market. And that all hinges on the Australian Skills Classification, which is a common taxonomy of skills. Sorry. I think we're going to that, so yeah, we'll be good. But I think I would like to preface this with, while the skills classification is supposed to be a common language of skills for the Australian labour market, we are still firm proponents of complementarity with other frameworks and taxonomies within the Australian context. We can't be everything. We're working really hard, but we definitely do know that we have gaps and we have things that we do not address in the detail that sectors might need. But we are not trying to be your sector specific or your digital specific framework. We're trying to be a whole of economy view. And we are, we also think about Sophia when we're thinking about the skills classification. How do we have complementarity with these other ones? So I'm not trying to say, we've got this, but we very much are open to feedback and that sort of thing on the skills classification. So as from my lovely introduction, I am the director of the team that manages this. So I will just do a quick demonstration just to give you an introduction, and then, later on happy to answer any questions as well and how this fits into the work we do at Jobs and Skills Australia. So the skills classification allows us to view the skills within occupations, and every single time I do a demo, I always pick an occupation that makes me think, I don't know if I know how to spell that, so I'll just, there we go. So this is a profile for a statistician. The skills classification, as the introduction said, has 3 different components. We have our core competencies, and these are the common skills that we think are common to every occupation in Australia. Everyone does these to a certain extent within their occupation. We provide a numerical competency level for those within each occupation, and that's not a level of importance. So for instance, something like numeracy, you might find for some health professionals might be a 5 or a 6. That doesn't mean it's not very, very important that they know how to calculate the medication they're giving to you. It's just the indicative value of that is at that level. And we have aligned with AQF levels here to go from sort of the very entry labour market level to the PhD sort of level of skill that you might have in the labour market. These are just indicative value descriptions, but yes, so we do provide a competency level for those. We also then provide the specialist tasks that might be performed within that occupation, and these are the day-to-day sort of tasks. This is also where we get our key sense of the, well, I can see it, sorry. Oh, there we go. We get a key sense of what a day-to-day might look like in an occupation, and also the transferability of skills across occupation, because of course your core competencies are transferable across everything. So when we, prepare, click on these, sorry, preempting. There we go. You can see an indicative amount of time that someone might spend within that occupation on that task. You can also see the other occupations that would use that same task as well, so you can get a sense of transferability. And we also have flags. The T and the E indicate if something is trending and emerging, and that's based on job advertisement data. So we look at whether something is showing up in job ads that wasn't before, or whether something is growing in job ads. Job ads are of limited use to us in terms of the base skills in occupations. I challenge you to find a dentist job ad that mentions the word teeth, but they do talk a lot about the latest technology and that sort of thing. So they are really useful for us in terms of what is growing or what industry is sort of looking for, but they're not as useful for us on those kind of assumed skills. So we do take into account a lot of various data sources, and job ads are one of them. We do align with ABS's ANSCO, which is the Australian Classification of Occupations. They are currently reviewing ANSCO, so if you have strong views, feel free to reach out, and also reach out to us because we do work with them a lot. But we have found that there are a lot of occupations that are in ANSCO but not really in ANSCO. They're often specialisations of an occupation, and so we do also provide profiles for those. There is no labour market data available even through census for these specialisations, but we do think there's value in defining the skills, and we just provide those skills that are substantially different from the base occupation. So we have those, so biostatistician in this case, which was quite important over the last couple of years. And then we also have the technology tools which are required within occupations. Again, we have the trending and emerging components there, and these are, we provide definitions, and then we also provide examples that are in use within the Australian context, and those examples are often taken from job ads, just so we are sure we are using examples that work. So you don't only have to explore the skills classification from an occupation perspective, you can also explore it from a skills perspective. And for us, this perspective is most valuable in education and curriculum mapping. So taking into account the skills, we cluster them at the family level. We also then cluster them at a skills cluster level. And then when you click on them, you can see the specialist tasks that are in that cluster, and then also the occupations that those tasks would show up in, and you can explore the classification that way. The final thing I will just quickly show you is last release in November last year, we released this. This is our similar occupations methodology, and these also show up on the occupation pages, but we use BERT and the natural language processing techniques to compare the specialist tasks themselves and the other components of our skills profiles to every other occupation, and we come up with a similar occupation score, so a similarity between occupations. This is something that's really important to us because at the end of the day, with our whole of economy view and with our very transferable view, we're mostly interested in transitions across occupations, not necessarily within them, because ANSCO is quite, doesn't really have those kind of levels of seniority that something like Sophia gives you, where you can kind of progress through the skill level. ANSCO doesn't have those, so we think about transferability across occupations. Not to say that obviously skill development as you go through an occupation is not also really important, but we are aware of our limitations, I suppose. So this is all downloadable. You can download the data files. It's all publicly available, and we are currently out for consultation at the moment for the draft profiles that we are hoping to produce, release in our next release. So this is the first time under Jobs and Skills Australia. We didn't do this under National Skills Commission, but we are keen to engage with people before we integrate them into the data set and before we integrate them into our similar occupations data set. So we'll be publishing more draft profiles before the middle of the year when we release, but they're all here. You can download the Excel file, see the various ones within those unit groups that we're working on, and provide us with feedback. But we're also always open to feedback to our current profiles as well. So yes, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Kate. So our next speaker, Kathryn Unsworth. A librarian in a previous life, Kathryn has transitioned from a focus on information management to data skills. She currently works at the Australian Research Data Commons, the ARDC, leading the skills and workforce development team. Her role is to drive a nationally coordinated approach to skills and training programs targeting key areas of the workforce that conduct, underpin and enable data-intensive research.
All of these talks so far are music to my ears. So, yes, and I guess that's why they're there. Okay, I've just got to get my... Is that it? Yeah, okay. Good-o. So, Sonia, I confess straight up, I'm going to go over my 5 minutes. So... today I'm going to be talking about the ARDC's digital research capabilities and skills framework. So Peter's right, there's a whole heap of frameworks out there, but the idea of a national skills classification is very, very enticing. But our particular framework really just relates, it's very specific to digital research. And we, at the time when we first started developing this, there wasn't anything really out there. Sophia wasn't at a point where we did look at Sophia. It wasn't at a point that it quite fit with our area. So skills and workforce development in the area of digital research skills have consistently been recognised as a key challenge. And I think I've got the wrong bloody presentation up. Sorry. Start again. Oh, maybe it is. Sorry. Talk amongst yourselves. That's it. Oh, come on. So this is obviously it. So skills and workforce development in the area of digital research skills have consistently been recognised as a key challenge for Australian research institutions and research organisations. The Australian Government's 2021 National Research Infrastructure Roadmap highlighted digital skills and workforce development as an area of rich opportunity for researchers. Skills underpin all work. They impact the types of work people perform and how successfully they perform it. Policy development and public investment in digital research infrastructure has enabled greater access to data. Data-intensive research and the emergence of new digital tools and methods have also increased the generation and availability of data. This has the potential to increase innovation and improve the rate, transparency and reproducibility of research, but only when matched with a highly skilled workforce. The barrier to realising these benefits is a globally widening digital skills gap. To tackle Australia's biggest challenges, such as climate change, healthy ageing, clean and renewable energy, and food security, just to name a few, today's researchers must have the digital skills to collect, manage, and analyse and manipulate data. To ensure Australia's researchers remain globally competitive, the ARDC is leading the development of a national digital research skills agenda in collaboration with training organisations, universities, research institutions, national research infrastructure facilities, government and peak bodies. So hopefully we can work together in this space. To that end, our ARDC skills team approach addresses 5 key areas, and I'm not going to go through them because there are some posters over there. If you're interested, you can have a look and see what we're working on at the moment. But of course, foundational to all of our work is the Digital Research Capabilities Framework. But why is a skills framework so important, so foundational? There are many reasons why organisations create capabilities and skills frameworks. Creating a framework sets a common standard for what each of us need to know and do in order to be effective and successful in our roles. There's a need to understand what the relevant roles are within a sector, organisation or team, what key skills and knowledge are required to perform roles successfully, what competencies can be used to assess the experience levels or levels of expertise. And by gathering this information from the first 3 steps in the model, it helps us assess and resolve any skills gaps and also recognise where expertise adds value. Where are your skills strengths and are they being exploited and leveraged? This information gathering also helps to develop learning pathways. We can identify and use existing resources and develop new resources where there are apparent gaps to provide professional development, a career-spanning professional development journey for each of us. So what makes up our skills framework? So this is the top few levels. It does go deeper than this. So the building blocks of the skills framework include components such as the capabilities and skills taxonomy. So here's another taxonomy, and the glossary that supports that taxonomy. The skill areas that we have identified are covering digital research, and they fall into 4 high-level skills cluster families. There's governance capabilities, data capabilities, software capabilities, and infrastructure management. So another component is data and digital research roles, identifying these roles and the skills needed to effectively perform them. The roles we're currently interested in fleshing out are very similar to, I think, Anthony's as well. Data architect, data engineer, data scientist, data governance related roles, and also the policymakers. You know, they need skills too when they're trying to make informed decisions about digital research infrastructure. And the roles related to software, such as research software engineers and researchers who code and so on. And this is just a template for our roles profile. Another important component is the matrix, which identifies some of the key digital research roles and maps these to capabilities and skills in the taxonomy, and then goes a step further to indicate the level of experience required for that role. These aren't prescriptive either. You know, it is all dependent on the role, but if we're looking at the sort of key skills that people need in those roles, it should apply. Additionally, the ARDC wanted to explore what organisations are best placed to deliver skills training, as indicated by the variations in green, and particularly understand the skills areas that we ourselves hold some responsibility for. Now that we understand where we are best placed to impact skills and workforce development, we can use internal expertise and collaborate with others in the sector to co-design and co-develop training packages, but first making sure there isn't already relevant training out there that we can point researchers to. Learning or training paths are an excellent way of collating and curating existing training. Where gaps are identified, we can reach out to those best placed to develop and deliver training to fill those gaps. Oh, okay, that was a bit weird. Oh, okay. The slides will be available anyway, so you'll have access to the stuff that you've missed as I kind of try to power through. It's okay. The next slide is just a really text-heavy slide, so I'll just talk to it. So what's next for us? We want to connect with owners of other relevant skills frameworks. We want to compare and contrast those frameworks, adopt a common terminology where that's appropriate, reference other frameworks with common and complementary skills, and I think, Kate, you mentioned that. We want to also mature the ARDC's skills framework, so ensure that the skills clusters that we cover are relevant skills and that it's reasonably comprehensive. We want to create a suite of relevant role profiles, and we want to work with, the communities and partners that we work with to get those developed. We've started internally because we've got quite a range of internal expertise, but those role profiles and learning pathways as well that we're going to create, we will take out to various communities to have them vetted and, okayed by everyone. And we also want to maintain the glossary because I feel like that is a very important part of a skills framework to be able to define, and we want to use standard definitions wherever possible. And then I've started talking to our comms folk about developing an interactive online interface for the framework. And then also a really huge step for us will be to link the framework up with our, the training portal, Digital Research Skills Australasia, so in short, DRESA. And that's me, done.
Yep. Great. Thanks, Kathryn. Our last speaker for this morning is Peter Embleton, who is the Coordinator Specialist Technologies Information Technology at the University of the Sunshine Coast. Peter is currently involved in the USC Skills Initiative to uplift the digital literacy skills of their researchers and will be using the ARDC skills framework to identify skills relevant to this project.
Thanks very much. So, set the context, we're a reasonably small university. Like many institutions, we're changing and maturing and growing, particularly now. So what I need to try and do is align what I can achieve with what the organisation, where the organisation is at the moment. So when we first started looking at this, not too long ago, I'm in IT, so I hear from the service desk, I hear a lot that, we need digital skills, we need digital literacy, people don't know this stuff. And I started looking at what is that? What is digital literacy? What is digital fluency? What is digital dexterity? No one knew what that was. So I was with Danny at the time and we said, okay, let's try and find out what that actually means. And started a whole holy war, so don't go there. I started looking at some papers, and this is just one excerpt from a paper where they tried to define what fluency and literacy meant. Once again, I went, wow, that is really, really hard for me to try and influence in my institution. So what I then thought I'd do is, okay, well, let's go and find out what my people think they need. And once again, that got really, really hard really quickly. So for me in IT, we've all been through SAS, IaaS, PaaS, all those sorts of words. Our users haven't necessarily been, so I think there is a big gap there. And that's where I thought I'd do my survey in, but that turned out to be really hard. Couldn't work out who was responsible for it, couldn't work out what success looked like, and couldn't get people to actually buy in because everyone was already busy changing in every other way. So basically, that didn't work. Then I saw Kathryn and the ARDC and I saw this and I went, okay, I now have something to hang my hat on. I have a framework I can work to. What this framework gives me is it gives me a persona. So I can say, are you a researcher? Are you a data analyst? Are you a scientist? It gives me an area of responsibility. This is really important for me, to work out who was responsible, because we know with training, particularly in this sort of training, in my institution, my academics are also my researchers. There's not much people that don't do both. So the overlap is significant. And so when I was looking at skilling up people, is that HR, is it Office of Research, is it academics, who is it? It's everyone and no one. So this gave me that opportunity to really say who's responsible. It gave me a skill cluster, so something to focus on. It gave me a size of the skill, which is really important for me. and it gave me legitimacy. When people say why, I say because ARDC says so. It is what it is, right? It took me a little while to understand this, and I was going back and forth with Kathryn going, where does grant writing come in? Where does this come in? And it's not trying to achieve that. It's literally just trying to achieve these skills. Now, underneath these high-level skills that Kathryn showed you and I've just shown you, there are the landscape, there are skill clusters, and they go down into Tier 1, Tier 2 and that sort of stuff, where they get a bit deeper. I don't try and go that deep. What I'm talking with my institution is, I won't go there. So the first thing I did was to work out who was responsible for what. In my institution, I said, okay, the landscape skills, data governance, well, that's definitely Office of Research. I'm not going to try and go there and address those skills. Infrastructure governance, who is that? Well, that's up in the air. At the moment, it's sort of me. Data management, that's library. Once again, I don't need to do those skills. They can do that as they choose. And then data generation and use and research software capabilities are both me. So by being able to break down those skills, I'm not trying to solve the whole thing. I'm only trying to solve things that I can influence. What I've done now is define level 0 skills, or this is what I'm working on, defining level 0 skills. So these are skills that aren't mentioned in Kathryn's framework, that aren't in Sophia. They're the ones that are underneath those, and they're really general skill sets. UI design, IaaS, PaaS, all that sort of stuff. What does a VM mean? All these really level 0 skills. And then I'm going and mapping those skills to Tier 1 and Tier 2 skill clusters. And I'm using the defined competency to define the size of the training, which is why it's so important for me. So as an example, awareness could be a 10-minute video, whereas practitioner could be a multi-hour training course. So using that size to help me define how to make that training successful. This is an example of where I'm going at the moment. So over here, I've got my level 0 skill, use of HPC, the landscape, the cluster it's in, and the competency, and just trying to map out where I think my really basic skills are that aren't covered elsewhere, and then trying to map that through to a competency. Don't you love PowerPoint animations? So that's that. What I'm doing now is mapping level 0 competencies to a tier. So here I've got a quick way I'm thinking about how I might do that, and how I might say that in the skill cluster analysis coding, for example, to say someone's an expert, they might have to tick 4 boxes out of those skill sets. And so working out what that definition means within UniSC. We're also looking at a learning management platform. So how do we integrate this into our learning management platform? The people, as I said, my researchers are academics. They are the same people. So if I can upskill them, I can win-win. And my academic development board are right on board with this. And when I spoke to them, they said the dreaded word micro-credentials. And I went, oh no. But, it's a carrot. And that's me.
Great, thank you, Peter, and thank you all. That was really fascinating discussion. And I think now what we're going to do is we're just going to, I'm just going to ask a question of the panel. There's a few questions I want to ask actually as well, but I'll start with why is the national approach to skills and workforce development across and interconnecting with all sectors so important? Now, who would like to tackle that question? I think I might go Kate.
Sure, thank you. This is on, isn't it? Yes. I think a national approach across all sectors is important, because for most of the new and emerging skills and the new and emerging occupations that are coming in, the people who are going to fill those roles and perform those skills are already in our labour market. They're not about to start their training. They are either going to be reskilling or retraining, or they're going to be learning on the job how to fill those roles. So when you have something across sectors and you can think about prior recognition of skills across sectors, regardless of where someone started their training, you can think about a much larger pool of skilled workers who can fill those roles. If you can give people frameworks and they can identify the skills they have and they can see that transferability of those skills, and then most importantly, they can identify specifically their skills gaps, and we can think about a unified approach to filling skills gaps where when people who are already in the labour market need to retrain, they don't need to go back and start at the start of a qualification that they don't need the full qualification for. I'm not going to say the M word, micro-credential, I'm not going to do it. But you can think about how you can actually target training to people to actually fill skills gaps, to actually help people, fill our roles that we're going to have. And then also because currently the system's very confusing. It's very confusing for new entrants to the training sector. It's very confusing for people who are re-entering it or already in the thing. There are 15,000 units of competency in VET alone. It's hard to navigate and understand skills transferability across different sectors, across different universities in the tertiary education sector. I think it's very difficult within universities to understand the transferability of skills being taught by different areas within the universities. They don't necessarily talk to each other about the transferability of those base skills that have been taught. So having these unified skills frameworks, I am a very big fan as well, Peter and I agree on that, and having that way to think about this, I think is incredibly important because it takes a lot of the inefficiency and a lot of the confusion away, and we improve the resilience of people and our labour market.
Great, thank you. I think, Peter, you have a...
Yeah, firstly, I didn't mean to suggest that we don't have a national skills framework, and I realise this is one of those moments where I really should check who else is on the panel before I start running my mouth. But if I've never sat in a panel and upset anyone, it wouldn't be me, so here we are. But I agree 100% with what you've just said there, Kate, because part of the things I think that we're missing here is when we talk about a national skills framework, and I will always stick to the applications of what this framework can do, because I like to think we can fix the problems with a single framework, and especially if it's a national one, because federation was a mistake, but that's a different discussion. So when we look at these things, we look at sort of the transferability of skills. But I think, Kate, you're the first person to mention TAFE or VET since, I don't know if it was here yesterday afternoon, because I wasn't here for that, sorry. But I think one of the things that we found quite interesting in our discussions with industry partners and educators was this idea that why is it we are so focusing, and I will say the dreaded M word, micro-credentials at universities, where if we're learning, for example, a computer scientist, training a computer scientist, learning the importance of computer science, the theory behind it, the big picture thinking, the skills you needed to do all that, absolutely is probably a university level qualification. But if you need to learn a new programming language, why are we not doing a quicker, easier and much more readily available TAFE course? We still see the VET sector as a step up into university rather than something we can use as a supplementary opportunity. Now, we have universities out there who are partnered with TAFEs and VETs and do a fantastic job of that. But within the sector, I mean, how many people here have thought, I need to learn a new programming language, what can I do at TAFE? Or how many people have instead gone to a university micro-credentialing place? It's that sort of variation. And the other one you mentioned, Kate, was learning on the job. Is how many people, when they move from one job to another, thinks these are the skills I learnt on the job that I can now put on my resume, without actually having to do a course while they're on the job, like the skills you actually learn on the job. Now, our friends up in Scandinavia, who do many things better than we do, have a great system where when someone is made redundant and moved on from their employment, some countries actually have it where that job goes into a skills profile and says, these are the skills you learned while you're on the job, so that it's standard. It's not standardised. It's reflected by your previous employer. You know that when someone goes to hire you, they can look at the previous employer's work and go, this is what they actually learned on the job. And it also helps give someone who's moving on and wanting to retraining and understanding what they've developed. Now, all of this can't work without a national skills framework that everyone is working towards, that everyone can use and is easy to understand. I'm not saying the national skills one isn't, but it is something where we can develop that more into something that helps us across the board.
Go on, thank you.
Yeah, I might just add to it. I mean, you think about our technology, it's just changing so quickly these days. And our jobs, AI is coming in, things are changing, and Kate was mentioning the reskilling. It's really important about how do we know where we stand, where we're going to next in a national sort of way. The other thing, and Kate talked about it before, there's a national one, which needs to be broad, but it's not going to cover everything. And if it tries to, it's going to break. And you almost need various levels. And Peter at the end was talking about, some of those skills, like, very particular skills. If you try and put that into another tier, it's going to break that too. So you need all various things to work together. The other thing about skills frameworks we heard about is there's lots of them. And I think it's a maturity thing. We are now realising we need it. And you'll see the next step is to try and bring some of those together as opposed to having more of the same and developing more. So working together, integrating some of these various levels and that I think is really important. The last thing I'll mention too is, and you've probably seen it in the workforce at the moment, it's very, our cost of living has gone up. Our wages have to approach it, and organisations are trying to think, who are the critical positions? You're not going to be able to help everyone initially with a wage rise, but who are the critical positions that they need to address? And they're trying to understand who in the organisation has the critical skills. And so I was at a conference last year for Gartner, and they were talking about this idea of how we pay people is based on their competencies, their skill competencies, not based on roles, responsibilities so much, though they're still important, but also their skill competencies. If they've got critical skills that are important to the business at that particular time, they'll get paid more. If the business changes and those skills aren't so critical, then their pay might drop down. So that change in how we pay it, and how do you describe that? And I think that's another important aspect here. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Kathryn, Peter, did you want to?
I might say something.
Yeah.
Is that on? Yeah. So I guess my perspective is, and it really does reflect some of the other panellists as well, is that I don't think there's been a lot of connection points. There probably are that we just don't know, but with the vet sector. But we're very interested in career spanning, that lifelong learning journey, and I think higher education has always purported to be, but I think it's more focused on academics and researchers within the system and that career spanning, training. And I think they forget that there's not too many people that make it through into academia and into research, and there's a whole cohort of people who go out into industry. And so we need to make those connections with industry and the vet sector much, much more stronger so that we can actually provide that career spanning lifelong learning. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, you're right, yeah. At this point, I think I'd like to involve the audience. If anyone has some questions for the panellists, specifically that last one, what are the next steps for a national coordination? We're all talking about these different skills frameworks and so forth, and what are the next steps? Would anyone like to comment? Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I'm just wondering about, just particularly in relation to that conversation you were just having about the vet sector and skills. My understanding, could be wrong, that the Australian Higher Education Graduate Statement was developed because overseas institutions didn't necessarily understand what Australian universities were graduating. That seems to be a disconnect then. If the majority of those people are not going into academia and are actually going into industry, that perhaps we should also be starting to fold that into these conversations. Is that something that's already happening?
From my experience, it is happening, but it's not happening readily enough. I think it was the Australian Institute of Mathematical Sciences released a report back in 2018, 2019, which identified that most of our PhD graduates are not going into into academia, they're going into industry. That's what they want to do. It's not so much that they're forced into doing it. Like at the moment, there's still that sort of within some universities, this belief that people who leave academia and go into industry are somehow failing to survive in academia. When the reality is now students are actually looking at it and going, I'm getting a PhD for the skills that a PhD gives me and for the passion to do it, because you don't survive a PhD without having passion for that particular work. I know I didn't. And then want to move into industry themselves. So they see that as an opportunity. Now, we have all of these programs that are now working towards, and ATSI runs one itself called IMNIS, which is looking at providing mentorship for researchers to go into industry. But I think at the moment it's still a disconnect between industry and universities and PhD graduates on what skills you develop as a PhD. And I think that's a bit of a missing point here, is that when you finish your PhD, as I said before, you have all these skills that you just don't know you have. And I think reflecting for those students what it is they actually have, whether it's things like universities can implement digital CVs that highlight the conferences you've presented at and the teaching you've done and the committees you've sat on during your PhD that help add to those things to show industry, this is what students are capable of beyond their, reptile cardiac function and ability to dissect a tiny skink or something like that. I use myself as an example for those things, but...
Can I also add to that there aren't just researchers in higher education either. There are government researchers, there are industry researchers. So having that national approach means that we're connecting everybody and, working towards, a standard, I guess, for skills uplift across that research sector alone. So.
I used to be in the Telstra Research Laboratory, and I was a researcher there, principal researcher, and some of you may know they actually closed down the research labs in Telstra in 2006. So there was a lot of us looking for work elsewhere at that particular time. And I was thinking, what position would I actually apply for? And I couldn't really nail it. And you go and look at job positions and they talk about this and that. But if you understood your competencies and then you could then map that on to relevant positions that are being advertised, how wonderful would that be? You would actually know and you'd actually match the people better in industry to those particular roles. So I think that there's opportunity there as well.
It was really exciting to listen to the plethora of skills frameworks that are coming out and being implemented. But what also it's at the back of my mind is how easy is it to actually put people into these boxes, sort of, and especially in an evolving field such as, say, in the digital area, such as, say, data science and so on. On one hand, we talk about hard skills and the soft skills, and if you look at most of the frameworks, the soft skills are conspicuously missing. And say, for example, a data scientist, you would expect them to also be a design scientist in some way, to be able to articulate and formulate problems and so on. But that aspect of that is completely missing in almost every framework. This is one example, but this is also the case with most other job titles or positions, I would say. And so is something being done to address this?
Right, who would like to tackle that one? And
Well, Anthony, though, Sophia does cover off on a number of soft skills. Yeah.
It does. Under the 7 levels of responsibility, it covers off on your soft skills and your behaviours. Yes. So, sorry. Oh, yeah. Sorry, everyone. Yep, Sophia has 7 levels of responsibility that then has 5 core competencies of influence, complexity, knowledge and business skills, and that actually covers off on your soft skills and your behaviours. The behaviour side's pulled in really for small to medium business enterprises that don't actually have their own frameworks internally. But going off the back of that, I just have to mention one thing. It's all good and well to create all these different frameworks, and this is probably my own personal opinion, but we need somewhere where we can see where all of the frameworks interlock and interconnect, and people can actually undertake assessment against those frameworks in a really easy way to be able to then understand where their skills transfer across all the different frameworks. And I must say, I only learnt about the Australian skills classification the other day, and I'm very excited about it. But I think as an industry, and I'm talking Australia-wide industry for jobs and skills, we really do need to look at how all frameworks from all industries interconnect. And the Australian skills classification, I think, is a really great starting point to start that mapping. But yes, it's all great and well to have the frameworks, but it's about assessment against the frameworks that is going to be the most important for the Australian community and international community in the future.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And that's what we're hoping to do with our framework, because it is quite specific and it's a quite sort of neat, I guess. Oh, yeah. Well, let's chat. So we want to be able to go, point out from our skills framework to other relevant skills frameworks as well. And I mean, even to Vitae and those sorts of frameworks that cover off on, grant writing and, all of those other academic skills, that they don't belong in our framework, but they certainly are part of that skill spectrum for researchers.
So go back to your question about how do you fit in. I think that was really well covered, because I was thinking I'm not an expert enough but I knew it had elements of it, so I didn't want to speak, so I'm glad you did speak up. But how do you fit in? If you think about that broad level that Kate was talking about, it's like a truck, it can fit anything in it. You think about the Sophia level, it's actually, it can connect into it, but it doesn't go down to, I'm a SASAP expert and whatever, and it doesn't want it to be there, because if it does, those things change a lot, even in the Sphere level, that changes a bit. Whereas at Kate's level, it doesn't change as much. So you can think each level down is going to change a lot more because technology is changing. So how you fit in, as you go down more, you go, bang, I'm basically in that level. And I agree, it's about how they all work together. It's really important.
Sorry, I'll just add that, at our level with the Australian Skills Classification, at that very broad level, we are very constrained by the other taxonomies that we interact with. So, for instance, for data scientists, that was brought into ANSCO in November last year. That doesn't mean we didn't have data scientists before that. I've got a bunch of them in my team. But we do try and be as responsive as possible with that sort of thing, and we will be bringing it into the next release, and we will be defining the core competencies for that. But I think a lot of those soft skills, especially for something like data scientists, go much beyond that level of list of 10 core competencies. I mean, those are really the base level, and that's where something like Sophia does give you that extra, level of detail. And so that's why we do kind of say complementarity is ideal, because Sophia had data science in there before ANSCO did, and therefore before the ASC. But when used in conjunction, and I think a great idea would be mapping. We need to shout it. The Australian Skills Classification interface is just an interface. It's not a tool. It was that, or just put the Excel file on the website. So we do have an interface, but it's not a tool. And I don't like to send job seekers or students or anyone like that there, because there is so much other contextualizing information that you need to be able to digest that information. And so having other tools that actually, map these things and help people use it and explore it is really important. And that is definitely not what we have on the Jobs and Skills Australia website. So yeah, thank you.
Great, thanks. Anyone else? Does anyone else have a question for the panelists or comment? Yep.
So we talk about industry and academia and how everything this fits together and how we should collaborate. But I've had experience in industry and I've had experience in academia, and I don't think that digital skills are valued in academia as they are valued in industry. So you go into industry and you're expected to know all of these digital skills, but in academia, no one is giving you the time and the material and the basics for understanding what digital skills are and why you need them if you want to go outside academia and if you want to keep working in academia, because digital skills are not just important for those people that actually work with digital stuff. They are important for anyone nowadays. I'm a microbiologist. That's what I'm saying. Why I'm saying this. I was working both in the bench and from being successful, I guess, with my research, I needed those digital skills, and no one was giving me time for actually learning any of those. And I think I'm new to this world. This is the first time that I hear a lot of people talking about digital skills. And I mean, I've had 8 years of experience as a postdoc and just 1 year of experience in industry. And I've learned a bunch of digital skills in just that year that I spent in industry, and very few while I was a postdoc.
So you would have heard from my background, I've been in industry and then I went to academia and I'm back in, government sort of. So I've gone across the whole spectrum. And in the university space, it was very that, we sort of identified very early on in the Monash Research Centre a need for somewhere in between IT and research. And it was hard because, as you know, there's different roles and responsibilities for each in an organisation like a university, and we sort of progressed it and talked about it. And I think a part of it's around making it transparent as a profession in itself. It's neither this nor that, and how do you develop it? And we have the same issue in defence, is that I'm doing part research and I'm doing part IT, and we need to structure it and describe it, and working with a HR group to get it established and recognised as such. I think that's the thing that we need to do, is that transparency, and it's around the building blocks. What do you do? What are the building blocks for doing that? So a skills framework that you can agree on, describe it, and work with the HR department through, and potentially having national acceptance. All those things are goodness in this space.
Yeah, I think, because that's where sort of I was, right? There's an assumption that academics know this stuff. And in industry, there's not. In industry, when you change, you train people. But the universities are so busy transforming that if we were to say to them, hey, we need you to do this particular training for all your people, where does it fit in their list of priorities? And that's why I had to break mine down and go, these are the areas I can influence, and didn't try and influence a whole lot. I'm changing what I can influence. That's the only way I could see it succeeding in doing that.
Hi, thanks. It's been really interesting to hear everyone's opinion, and I feel like my question might have just been kind of answered. I'm wondering, I'm coming from, so the area that I've been focusing on is social science researchers, so it's quite a multidisciplinary area, as everyone would know, and there's a growing trend, obviously, for academic researchers to be dealing with data, and they might not necessarily have come from that background. So I'm wondering if there is an argument to be able to formalise the things that they're learning on the job, to benchmark competencies and build that trust, because there has been a few instances, I won't name which areas, where academics have published papers and other academics cannot reproduce that same data, and it's kind of came to light that maybe they didn't actually have the skills to be producing the data in the first place. So I think that if we could formalise their skills that they're learning into a qualification or accreditation, it just builds that trust, and then they feel more confident to share their data, because there's this real, there is a bit of a thing within the disciplinary to, oh, I'm not going to share it because no one will understand it, but it might actually come down to they may not feel confident in what they're sharing.
So, I mean, I think I know the cases you were talking about for one thing, but we won't talk about those. I think part of the challenge is that having an opportunity to reflect on what the extra skills they develop as researchers is excellent, and I think it absolutely should be reflected. But I also think there's a case to be argued for people who aren't necessarily doing digital skills as part of their undergraduate degree and their honours or masters or whatever, and then they go into research. So to give an example, when I was not finishing my PhD in biology, before that I didn't finish my degree in computer science. I'm the great unfinisher. But I knew enough about programming and things like C++ and like that when my colleagues in ecology were learning how to use R, because you now have to use R and SPSS to do all of the statistics stuff, none of them knew how to program. Not a lick of programming. They all came to me and they're like, how do you actually do some of this stuff? Which was great. I was the most valuable person and had lots of free beer given to me as a result. But at the end of the day, there was at no point did any of them think, hey, can we go to maybe the IT school or faculty in the university to see what micro-credentials, and again, I'm using that dreaded word, might be available for them to learn how to do this stuff. And at the same time, there was no outreach from these IT departments and IT schools to say, hey, we know that in biology you're doing all this sort of work now. Can we give you some more formalised training, or at least give you a better understanding about how this works, why this works, so that you can do this better? So I think a lot of our universities are reaching outwards on micro-credentialing to get more students in without having a moment to think to ourselves, hey, how do we do this internally? Because we have social scientists handling big data now. We have biologists doing complex programming and statistical work, and we have all of these NCRIS facilities which need people to be trained how to use before they can actually use them, and they might not be from these facilities. I wouldn't expect a biologist to be able to understand how to use the National Computing Institute supercomputers and things like that, but some of them do now to handle big data. So within the universities, I think a bit of inter-departmental training is probably a really good step to start considering. And again, reflecting for those people that they've had this training so they're more confident.
I know at our institution we did a research data management project last year, and one of the outcomes from that was I now see all the research data management forms coming through, which gives me the ability to be able to plan ahead and actually contact those people and go, hey, I see you're doing this. How can I help you? Or I can see that in 2 years' time you're going to want 10 terabytes of data. How can I talk to QSIF and get that for you? So yeah, that's been really effective for us, is actually seeing the visibility of the pipeline coming through so I can start to think about where I need to go.
I talked about a transformation in DSTG in our e-research space, and that transformation was being, less of more like an IT department and more of in the business. How do we become more in the business? So things how we measure ourselves, how we work, etc. People understanding what we do. So it was that journey helped us, and with that we've gone from they didn't talk to us about with the planning and that they were doing. They can now intimately see how we fit into the business, a part of the business, work for them, and that just comes naturally now. So I think it's about that. The business, that the research is understanding more about how that e-research space is, what it can do, and how it fits in and is part of the business.
Yes. No. Oh, sorry.
Just sort of going back to a little bit what Giorgia was talking about with digital skills in academia, we're seeing it at Griffith at an undergraduate level, postgraduate level, where it comes down to the curriculum design, the assessment design. What might be great when they're putting in, perhaps they have to do some data analysis in their assignment, but there's an assumption there that they know how to do a pivot table, they know how to produce an infographic, they know how to do some very basic data analysis, and they don't. And it's great that they're doing the assessment, but often the skills aren't cut. They're not being taught these skills. So they might be told to go and do a LinkedIn course, but the LinkedIn course is often very much perhaps finance-based or industry-based. It isn't within the context. So it's something the library is trying to address, but I think it starts very early on. And often and we see it again with HDR candidates, there's an assumption that they know this stuff and they don't. And it's sort of, again, speaking to a professor who's an ecologist doing a lot of research and working with a lot of HDR candidates, the ones that can do the data analysis, that can do the data visualizations, they get noticed and they get either invited to be on research projects, or they get the academic positions, or they go into industry, and they're good at communication skills, those soft skills that aren't necessarily articulated, but they get noticed.
I mean, that's where I was going with those level 0 skills. They're exactly those. And having that size of skill means I'm not going to send them on a 2-week Excel training course. It is a 10-minute video for how to do a pivot table, even though I can never work it out. But yeah, I think that's why I've underpinned those in doing that. And I've got legitimacy of ARDC behind it.
Great. I think we had a question here.
Just a quick comment about something you were saying, Anthony, and also some of the other comments that have come through. I think partly what we're talking about is the third space, and that's the idea of the space between the academic and the professional in a university environment, and that line's often been a very hard line to cross, which is very frustrating if you're in a professional environment where you have expertise and you're potentially somebody who could, let's say, sort of take a PhD student through their program, because you're the person that's got that expertise, but you can't because you're classified as professional staff, not academic staff. So the third space is sort of what we're talking about here, is the people who are working in that, have that domain knowledge and have the skills, but are not classified as academic and won't appear as an author on a paper, because that's not the currency they're working in. So I think there's a bit of development for us to be thinking just more generally about that.
There's also a little bit of resistance in the universities about creating that space. The HR department goes, well, we already do enough job families and that, we don't need another one. But I think they do, and this is important for the universities, because people in that space, as you know, they feel like we're not part of that domain, we're not part of that domain, we're a little bit different. And it's a really, as you know, an important part of the university's business now. So, yeah.
I Sach from QSIF, but before QSIF I did have probably Melbourne Uni gig and a QUT gig, and I guess one of the areas that I was particularly focused on, sort of the dichotomy between professional and academic staff, and trying to give people who are caught in that third space some sort of career trajectory, which doesn't exist at the moment. So on that note, yes, the HR departments can be helpful, but often not. I mean, let's be blunt. And I think part of the challenge is, of course, academia in that two-track system in the enterprise bargaining is the academic space is about the individual. It recognises an individual, and the professional track recognises the job. So often we talk about professional jobs and not the individual. And yet, as per this room, there's many of you who contribute to research activity and genuine intellectual input into activity, and yet the academic framework won't necessarily recognise it. Now, it's all not all doom and gloom, I think. There is certainly some reflection and in the community and some acknowledgement of that. And there have been some changes. I mean, the Melbourne Uni model around academic specialist job family tries to address some of that. And some of the things that we introduced at QUT, which has a track called a Research Infrastructure Specialist track. And what that track does is, if you're a data scientist, you can be moved across to the academic track and be recognized as an individual, and you will have some bespoke metrics that you need to fulfill when you come to promotions. You might not become a professor, but you can be a level E still in that track. So there is hope, and it's not, HR often points to the EB being the hurdle that can't be crossed, but it can be, to be honest.
Yeah, I know with inside of Defence or DSTG, they do want to provide more structure, so they're really keen to work with us. And as I said, it's about the building blocks. How do we use building blocks for it? And we've got researchers in many different spaces, as you can imagine. I can't really talk about all of the different areas, but it's broad. It's not as broad as a university who have art students and that. But also I think it's around, bringing those skills frameworks together. You're not going to have one skill framework that's going to describe every single thing at every different level. It's about how do they work together, and how do you legitimise this? And it's good to see some HR groups moving in that direction, and I think that helps change the tide, so to speak.
I had a supportive vice chancellor and a provost. That's what it came down to ultimately. The senior executive have to be on board. But also, I guess, one of the colleagues in here talked about industry experience. We wanted to do pilot scale green hydrogen. I can't go and hire an engineer, a mechanical engineer, and say, here, the best I can do is a level Hugh 10. Somebody who's worked in industry for 20 years, I can't give them a salary at a Hugh 10. So the system in itself, I think, is problematic in supporting the country's ambitions to become more innovative, to be honest. That's the bigger problem that the nation actually has.
So when I think about skills taxonomies, the building blocks is actually one of the best examples, the best ways to looking at it. And I think what we get stuck on, and this is when we look at professional and academic, or in my world it's industry or academic, because we have industry fellows, we have academic fellows. But every time you start putting people into those categories, it really starts limiting their ability to move in and out of that space. So when we elect our fellows, we say to them, are you an industry fellow or an academic fellow? But if you look at someone like Kathy Foley, who's the chief scientist and one of our fellows, she's worked in industry, she's worked in government, she's worked in academia. And the minute you start trying to categorise it, you wipe out half of the work that she's ever done. So I think when we're starting to look at skills taxonomies, the big picture view is great and exactly how you should do it. And I still look at it as a biological taxonomy where you have your clades, which are, animalia, plants, all those sorts of things, which don't change very often. But everything else moves quite readily with inside things. And it's almost like we need to stop talking about jobs and job titles and job classifications about what jobs it is, but almost like the skills, and keep it at that skills level discussion. You know, when I hire a policy analyst, I don't think I've hired a single policy analyst that has a policy degree. I think I'm the only one in my team. What I have is someone who is a science communicator. I have someone who is an economist. I have someone who has international international relations experience to try and get the skills for a team that works. Now, how that works in academia is a bit different, but every academic lab, research lab, has a collection of people with different skills. You don't hire the same cardboard cutout research student, I hope, in a research lab. I really hope that's not how it happens. You know, you develop a group of skills, which is why you have collaborative papers with 20 authors on it. You know, so we're looking at the sort of skills that complete a team, which is almost where I think the professional staff within universities almost have it more right than the academic track, because they look at the team and the work you do as a group. So I think those building blocks that create the groups that do the work is almost a future approach to these things once we start getting the language right.
Another thing I don't think it's working now. Yep, this one works. Another thing I'll inject too is organisations like to benchmark against each other. You know, are we the right size? You know, do we have enough here? So you can think in the e-research space, what is our level? Are we right? And how do we compare that? And without that standard, it's very difficult to do that. Yeah.
I have another.
Yeah, just to provide a reference, I suppose, for what the discussion was over here, the NCRIS directors wrote a position paper that was released over summer, discussing the academic specialists at Melbourne and the QUT research infrastructure. So that's a worthwhile look for everyone. It's around. I'm not sure if.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah.
I think we. Yeah.
I think it was released by. I'm not sure if it was you guys.
I think there's a couple of NCRIS facilities that did release it on their.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah.
So, yeah, I'll find a link.
Yeah. Awesome. It was like signed by everyone except for like 2 of the NCRIS projects, and it highlighted all of these issues.
Mm.
Thanks. A couple of points, or maybe questions. We can't not talk about job titles because they're the hook, right? So, and trying to find the right job title is something that I'm actually struggling with at the moment. I'm recruiting. Or about to recruit. So that's actually a challenge. The other thing is, certainly given the audience, can we ensure that the conversation includes support? Because the support roles are evolving as much as the research-directed skill set is evolving. And we need to be able to support these early adopters as well as the peak of the bell curve, as well as people who are well behind. So we need that recognition in there for the support systems, as well as those who work in the research space.
Yep.
I agree. I mean, job title, I mean, this is it. You describe all these positions, and no matter where you go, it's a different position. And as I was saying before, how do you know that that's the position for you and it's out there? And I think eventually, if you did have a skills framework and you knew your competencies, you could put into the search engine for jobs and you bang. So you're actually getting a better connection of people that are closer. But job title's still important. I think we do need to standardise. I know some of the work that Kathryn's doing is what are these jobs in the research space, and coming up with that consistency across, and that helps us, even when I was talking about before with benchmarking, I've got so many e-research analysts working in my team. They've got less. And I know Cordit does this a lot. It does that benchmarking across the universities to see their IT and how they're doing. It's very hard in our space in e-research at the moment.
And I think though the ASC does puts in the job families as well, so like those related roles too. So that's really useful.
The related roles are actually the sort of the most useful thing that I think we can have out there, is because when I say we don't want to focus on job titles, I'm not suggesting we get rid of them entirely. I'm suggesting that we just don't focus on them as heavily as we currently do. My biggest argument I have with the regular, who here follows Andrew Norton, who does all the higher education stuff. I argue with him on a regular basis because he tells me we don't need any more scientists because we're not getting enough, there's not enough jobs for scientists out there. And I tell him quite often that he's nonsense because you do a science degree not to go and become a chemist. You don't do a chemistry degree to become a chemist any more than you do a gender studies degree to go off and become a gender scientist. You develop that degree to develop the skills that take you to do a job that might be very different to what you were doing. And I think that's where we sort of need to focus less on the how does a degree match with a job and focus on how does a degree give us the skills that we can then apply to many jobs that we might be interested in.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of the research software engineer, which has only been around for the last 10 years, I think. But it's only 5 years ago that I had a friend working with me, and he said, oh, thank you for sending me that video about a research software engineer, what they do, because I finally know what I do. I finally know that this is my role. And he was quite telling because he's a very smart guy. And he was working for a university, but then, of course, he went to work for industry afterwards, which is a bit sad. But that is a very legitimate role, the research software engineer. Not a researcher, not an engineer, but supporting the vital research that's been done. With coding languages and HPC technology and cloud, etc.
Especially in the infrastructure space too.
Yeah.
The other thing, I mean, we realised as part of our transformation, we did this big transformation, remediation of our organisation, and it's a really disruptive thing and stuff like that. But really what you want to do is do incremental evolutions. But you can imagine some of these careers and positions and that, they just slightly change over time, so each of the different elements of it, it changes. And so you want those building blocks to be able to describe that and review it and then change that in time. Whereas at the moment, we don't speak that common language around it, so it's very difficult to do that and bring it all together. But you're right, it's that legitimisation of these positions and this profession in itself. And the more, groundswell we get in it, the better we have in influencing our organisations to move in that direction too.
Absolutely, yeah. Does anyone have any other comments or questions? No, well, it's been fantastic. I think we're actually a little bit early, but we might wrap it up there. Another round of applause for our panellists.
We're going to have a little a fireside chat for the next half hour. And so I apologise for the people behind me. Why don't you just get up and come over here so I can kind of see you and speak to you, because I'm going to be very rude. I know my great team's behind me, so come on, just come around so we know that everyone's kind of in front of us. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, see, you've moved up and are around. Okay. What's Pen doing? So welcome back. Today, or this afternoon, is it afternoon? Nearly. At this point in time, I'm here with Dr. Fonti Kar and Dr. Jose Ferrer from the UNSW Coders Group. Fonti is an evolutionary biologist wearing R shoes and a data analyst with the Atlas of Living Australia and software developer and educator at UNSW. And Jose is an ecologist and research fellow at UNSW also. And these are founding members of our, I'm already in your group. Of the Coders Group that you started up. So can I start with asking you to tell us about how the group started? What motivated you to create a community group? What was missing in order for you to go, we need this thing?
Okay, now we're working. Hi, everyone. I think we started UNSW Coders because we felt there was a need to learn something together, and learning something together makes the whole learning process more rewarding and more satisfying, and you learn faster. Those were the main driving factors in starting the group. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, hello?
Okay. Yeah, well, so when it started, I got the invitation from Fonti and also from Aniko that they had this idea. And well, I came by just like, okay, maybe I can provide some help. I was not sure at the beginning how it was going to be, but I think from what we discussed at first meeting that we had trying to plan, I thought, well, this is similar to what I have always wanted to do when I was, before I came to Australia, with yeah, the experience that I had before with students and so on. I thought, well, this is really what something that can help students to get together and talk more about how to solve problems and how to learn, like how to share what they already know or what they have already learned with other students, like helping everybody to recognize what they already know, how far they are learning are, and how they can help people that are just beginning, and how they can get help from people that have more experience. So trying to connect this, yeah, different levels of skills among the students to help each other.
Right. So it was really a community of practice around a shared learning goal, but of course at different levels. So my next question is about that community setup, and how did you like practically build the community? What kinds of things did you do to bring people in, and what kind of support from, I mean, well, from the institution or from key people or keen people was really valuable? You reflect on that.
It started with me shoulder tapping people like Jose, finding people that are really passionate about using R and also really good educators. From then, we had a very small committee of students and staff, all voting on various logistics, how we're going to communicate to members, and how frequent we were going to do events, and so forth. I think some key players that really supported the community forming stage was actually some of the other groups that exist at the university level. So we really leaned on the UNSW ResTech community, that we've got some representatives here in the audience. And what was really amazing about that process was that they had a really amazing reach across the people we wanted to help, but some of the events we were offering didn't overlap with theirs, so that was really helpful and important, I think, in that forming process.
Yeah, so I think it was really helpful to have this, so the university already has structures and units to help students and researchers, but there is always space to like we found a good space to fit in and help to fill a gap. So we received a lot of help from ResTech or support from ResTech, but also from Stat Central, because I think one thing that happens particularly with R or any programming language is that the students or the people, researchers also start using it, and they have to solve problem, not only how to program or write the program, but also understanding statistical terms or statistical functions, and also their technical, like what is the best function for this particular problem in ecology, in chemistry, et cetera, et cetera. So sometimes people come to ask questions, and actually the question that they have is an intersection between more statistical question and more like technical programming questions. So you really need to have like different views on some problems to really find the solution, and that's what we almost always have someone from Michelle is from South Central, or from South Central. And when the questions get like very statistical, specific, then she helps us with that. And sometimes, as Red Stage has also their drop-in sessions or hacky hours, and we connect to those sessions. And when someone has a specific art question, then we try to help. So it's useful that we have, we help them and they help us, and yeah.
Right. It sounds like you triage each other's expertise in a way.
Somehow, yeah.
Ah, great. Okay, well, going then deeply into that that problem or the problems that people bring to you, let's focus on the researchers and those kinds of like the doing of using R, which is what your community group is all based on. So what makes a difference when researchers are putting those skills to the tests? What are they learning to do that is making a difference? And you can get really technical now, tell me that what does R help them do that they wouldn't have been able to do before?
I've been using R since kind of the early days. So to see it transform from a statistical tool to now you can build blogs, to building more sophisticated websites, to interactive UIs, it's crazy and really amazing. And to distill some of those information into workshops for the researchers, the students, or the staff. What they do with it, it's completely up to them. I forgot the question now.
You started answering, it was about those, what is useful about R and what's coming up from, in the community that they're really interested in learning. And you can, let's get stuck into what is a digital skill with reference to R.
Yeah, well, I think so one thing that I have observed in many of the drop-in sessions is that, so there are people that are just starting and R is the first programming language that they are learning. But there are also many that used to, that have learned or have used before Python or another program for doing analysis and now switch to R because either they have a very specific problem and they're looking for a very specific package to apply a function, or because they are now in a research group where the other members of the group use R, and it's easier to use the tools of that group, and they have to learn how to use them. So it's like two different kinds, like the ones that are learning from the beginning, and then those ones that are switching or coming over from another program or software. I think also the other thing is that when as Fonti said, that when our generation or our group learned R, it was a language and software that was consolidating, that was expanding the whole time. And I remember when I started learning R, sometimes I wanted to apply a function. I didn't find a package for that. But I said, well, maybe in a few months' time, someone will have done it. And that really happened. It was like an exponential curve where packages were being published the whole time. And you just have to wait before someone produces it. And sometimes you wait a couple of months and it appears. Right now, it's like the opposite. There are packages everywhere. And there are many sorts of packages. And then the students, their view of R is like when they arrive, R is already consolidated. And it's really something that they need to know, but they don't. like they try to find, or they need to find like a direct way to get to the results. Like, okay, there are 5 packages that apply this function. What is the best one? Or I started to learn this one and I have a problem with this one. How do I fix this problem to make it work and so on? So it's more like the views of the users have been changing a lot. And I particularly feel that I'm still, I have to switch the way I think about R, because I learn it one way, but the students or the interest of the students is a little bit different, and they might be more focused or more like this is one tool among many other tools that I need to use. So I cannot spend that much time learning everything about R. But rather, how do I use it for this specific question, and then how do I combine this result with something else that from another skill or another software? Yeah.
It's really interesting to think about those how different your own learning about a tool is, and being confronted with someone who just wants to use it for like one particular thing. And I wonder, maybe would that be a future topic or a goal of your group to help people find out how to assess different R packages for those very narrow, hammers that they want to use it for, rather than learning the whole tool there. I'd like to ask, with this community, are there other like R communities, or for example the carpentries that relate to what you're doing in the coders group? Are there other groups that or community organisations that you have relied on and have made some impact on how you run your community group?
Well, we've already mentioned ResTech and Stat Central. Those are kind of key players, but the Carpentries is a major one. Both of us came through the instructor course, and Mark's in the crowd, and I think he's one of our instructors. Maybe not. Maybe yes. And I think that was really helpful, just to learning how to teach effectively with the learners in mind. Walking through your own errors and explaining errors, I think, and creating that opportunity for learning and showing people how to Google search effectively. I think teaching people those skills of debugging and looking for help, or writing a minimal reproducible example of the problem you're facing makes our lives easier, and when we provide coding support as well.
Yeah, that's right. So we got also through, when I got that invitation to participate in the structured training by the Carpenters, was also through ResTech and through so it was like a combination of like the resources at the uni and this opportunity. So I got that opportunity to do the training, and also the idea was that we like that would help to our group, but also that would also get a more like how do you say, more participation in the activities in ResTech, and helping other students and staff through the events or activities from ResTech. And I think, within the university we have this connection. We haven't had, well, we do have like Fonti. You're connected with the R Ladies, I think, with other groups outside the university, but also in, I don't know, R Ladies is in Sydney or beyond?
Yeah, Our Ladies, there's an Our Ladies Sydney and there's Our Ladies globally. But there's also other university our user groups that we form connections and wanted to do kind of, we invite each other to different speakers, or to different workshops, excuse me, and share speakers that way and have more collaborative workshops.
Yeah, I can see you coming together for the next ResBaz in town and maybe beyond. Okay, thanks, Sonia. All right. Does anyone in the audience here have a question for our fireside chatters? Fonti and yes.
Hi, thanks for the shout out for Restec. That's good. Just a quick question. Are you doing it online now or in person?
This is a constant debate among the organisers. We were doing online during kind of the rough bits of lockdown. At the moment, it's all in person because we started as a university group, and when we were online, we noticed we had a lot more audience from outside of the university. But it's a tricky one. When we ask for feedback from learners, they often want a hybrid option. But it gets complicated real fast. I'm sure a lot of people understand that.
Yeah, also some groups that have asked us to collaborate and to share the workshops, they also want them online because they don't want to move to UNSW to attend a workshop. They want to do it online, and that's tricky because we need to have more support within our group, more consolidation within our group, so to be able to provide both or some solution for that.
Hello. Are you in contact with the CODA group in Townsville?
Well, we're not, but we should talk after.
Fabulous.
Hi. Thanks for the talk. I just was wondering, where do the resources come from? Is it entirely volunteer work that you put in, both of you, or do you get any resources to do the events or to administrate the admin part of the events?
So we're entirely volunteer based. So when you reach out, so I always feel really bad when I reach out to postdocs or PhD students who have existing work demands. I think there's definitely opportunities to consolidate resources within the department or within the university to help support a group like us. It's hard.
Thank you.
Yeah, but it's mostly, so it's not only the two of us, but a larger group, and some people move in their careers, they are no longer at university, but then we have new students, or not new students, but people joining the group in their career stage. And yeah, it's dynamic, and we have to learn how to make the best of it and consolidate as much as possible.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today. Can I ask one last question, which is, what are you looking forward to this year in your group? What are the unsolved things that you would like to see magically resolved?
More members?
Yeah, recruitment.
More members?
Recruitment, and I think that's the biggest one. People build. Like, people feeds community, and community needs people. That cycle needs to continue seamlessly.
Right. Well, wish you all the best with that. Yeah. Please give our Fonti and Jose a round of applause. All right. Well, Kathryn, over to you for our next segment.
Now we have a series. Is this working? Yes. Now we have a series of lightning talks, and so could those speakers just maybe prepare yourselves? This is going swish back. So, Nisha, are you in the room? Oh, there you are. Okay, so what I neglected to sort of point out this morning when I welcomed you all back was that on our day 2, yesterday we were concentrating on success factors for skills training, and our focus was really on what can trainer communities do to help scale skills, build community and enhance learner engagement, and all within that sort of sustainable model. Whereas today we're trying to, and you will have noticed from the skills framework panel session, that we're actually now looking at day 2 around influencing national skills conversations and what we can do as a sector to collaborate on some of those issues. Oh, sorry. Just don't trip over. Yep. And what we can do to solve some of the big issues that we face nationally. And I think one of the, the sticky note that I read out this morning very much alludes to that. So what I want you to do when you're listening to these lightning talks, they're pretty much based on provocations, much more tamed down provocations than some of the ones that we had originally. Maybe not so politically correct. But listen in to these lightning talks and think about, because following that, I'm going to get you to do some sticky note brainstorming, taking on board the other person's note about getting all voices in the room heard, about what are those things that are foremost for you in terms of trying to solve, but thinking about it at a national level, how that might impact. It doesn't have to be at a national level. So we're looking at Fonti and the work that they're doing with their local coding group. And, the Burnett Institute does a similar thing as well. But how do we, maybe help those coding groups connect with each other and build community, whether they're in UNSW or, across. It could be in an NCRIS facility, or it could be another institution or whatever, just getting those people connected. So that might be one thing. But anyway, I will stop talking and hand over to Nisha. And each of the lightning speakers are going to just introduce themselves, just so that it's a little bit more flowing.
Thank you. Good afternoon, I guess. We've reached 12 noon, so kia ora koutou. I come to you from across the Tasman. I am Nisha Ghatak. I'm a training lead at New Zealand eScience Infrastructure, or NESI. My presentation today will be a marathon run of what we do with our training service and how NESI as a national organization helps build capability across Aotearoa and beyond. So just a quick look at what kind of services NESI offers. So what is NESI? We are a national investment created out of a collaboration between universities in New Zealand and the Ministry of Business and Innovation. So that's how we are funded. And apart from our usual offerings of HPC platforms, we also have our data services, our consultancy service, and training. So my job usually deals with the training side of things. So I'll do my best to take you through our efforts in that space. Okay, training. Could we move the slide to slide 3, please? Yeah, thank you. So yeah, what do we exactly do? So slide 4, what do we exactly do? So we promote local training initiatives. Oh, can I change here? Oh, okay. Okay. We can promote, so what do we do with our training service? We promote local training initiatives. We advertise and instruct NESI's training offerings and encourage connections between trainers to collaborate across institutional boundaries. And in doing so, what we do is we help locate the local training needs. And so we sort of make sure that the trainers are well funded, and that they know that they're supported through NESI's initiatives to go and offer trainings if needed. So the other thing that we do is we provide NESI users with the appropriate timely call to action should they need any for the trainings that they offer. And the last thing that we do is our capability building through our global connections. So that's where the Carpentries and our partnership with the Carpentries usually helps us out with. So how do I change this? Partnerships, okay. Partnerships, and do I change one more time? Oh. Okay, I cannot work with this, sorry. Could I have someone help me out and just say, okay, next slide, okay. Partnerships, so that's slide 6. So who are our partners? We partner with the universities in New Zealand. We partner with something called Crown Research Institutes. So they are CRIs, often funded by the Crown. And we work with them and various research centers across New Zealand. Next slide, please. Slide 7. So the CRIs, or the Crown Research Institute, so they often focus on digital transformation, and that's where NESI helps. So some of their needs are around building their digital research workforce. And I'll try my best to show an example of a recent partnership that we've, an example of partnership that we've recently gone through. NESI partners with these organizations to come up with a training plan that works for them. And that builds awareness around the need for knowledge and why researchers should go through those trainings and how that will help the organization in the long run. And our training plans are therefore driven by needs and not specific checklists. And we often make sure that we collaboratively deliver on those plans. So it's not just NESI, we often rely on our collaborators to do so. Next slide, please. So here's an example of some recent, of a recent collaboration that we've had with an organization called Ag Research. So that's a CRI in New Zealand. And we knew what the sentiment at work was. So we knew that they wanted researchers to do bigger and better science. And what they needed was our help in creating a training plan that works for that particular purpose. So, so our job there was to recognize the challenge and help them out. So NESI thus works to shift the needle within an organization, and it is our responsibility to therefore bring people together and make sure that they have what they need to shift workforces. Next slide, please. And this is where I take a moment to talk about our partnership with the Carpentries. Sorry, next slide, please. So slide 10, yes. An important part of our partnership with the Carpentries is our is that it's quite similar to that of the Australian institutions who are also fellow members and have been doing some amazing work with them. So I'd like a moment to talk about why the Carpentries. So why did NESI exactly need to collaborate with the Carpentries? So I'm sure most of us in this crowd know what the Carpentries is about, but it's because it's a community-developed, robust, scalable approach to capability building. It is also well respected and sought after in New Zealand as well. So what we realized is that this model and the material that Carpentries gives us has helped transform the way New Zealand teaching has changed over the years and has changed the training landscape as well. So some examples have been of how University of Auckland has adopted Carpentries' ways of teaching, and that has really changed the way classroom teaching has developed over the years. So that's something that we are incredibly proud of. So yeah, this is just a few pointers on how NESI has been a Carpentries partner since 2015 and how that has changed over the years and has been getting stronger. Next slide, please. So just a quick shout out to what we do through New Zealand Carpentry Connect. So New Zealand Carpentry Connect is an annual event to make sure that those in the community, so trainers in the community, get a chance to come together. And it's free because NESI funds this event. It's a good opportunity for potential trainers and enthusiasts to come together and meet current trainers and know more about the carpentries and know how they can get through instructor training if they wish to do so, and also know more about the community itself. So I want to take a moment to reiterate something that Liz had mentioned yesterday. So there are plans to have bi-monthly calls, community calls, and it's going to be something completely focused on the Australian and New Zealand partnership, and as means to make sure that the trainers from both countries get to connect and talk to each other about any of their needs. And so yeah, thank you, Liz, for helping me out with that. Next slide, please. So Genomics Aotearoa. Next slide. So just a quick shout out to our partnership with this research center called Genomics Aotearoa. With whom we have taught about 57 workshops over the years. So we started this series of workshops in 2019. So we were quite sure that COVID would dampen our efforts, but it has gone on quite well, thankfully. And all these workshops have been, it has been done by a collaboration of trainers who have worked across 10 institutions in the country to make sure that this has been a success. And this is definitely a proud example of the kind of work that NESI's training service has been doing over the years. So next slide. So where to from here? So what are we exactly hoping to do? So more people, more collaboration, more ideas. That's basically the crux of it. So we hope that there would be opportunities for big changes that we want to work on collaboratively, not just within New Zealand, but with our collaborations with Australian, Australian partners as well. And this is not something that we can do alone. So if anybody has got ideas or wish to take up this offer, please do come forward. I'll be so happy to talk to you. And last slide. Just a shameless plug for the upcoming New Zealand eResearch New Zealand conference next week. Do come down to Waikato if you want to hear the amazing lineup of speakers. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Nisha. Our next speaker is Melissa Burke from the Australian Biocommons. Is she? Oh, there you are, right in front. See, I've got my glasses on, I can't even see you. And her talk is going to be, Nobody Has Time for Training is Doing Less the Answer.
Hi everyone, I'm Melissa. I'm the Training and Communications Officer with Australian Biocommons. So Australian Biocommons is one of those NCRIS supported organisations. We have a focus on bioinformatics. And what we're doing is connecting life science researchers with the digital infrastructure and training that they need in order to do their research. But today I'm going to tell you a story. And the story starts like this. So, not so long ago, in a universe uncannily like this one, a researcher started teaching others digital skills. They worked alone to craft a workshop and brought it to small groups of people and helped them to hone their skills. Soon, word got out that the workshop was actually pretty good, and more people came knocking at their door. And so the researcher gave them more. They repeated their workshop and reached even more people, and they realised they really love teaching, they really love working with others and helping them grow, and they wanted to do even more workshops. But soon, the researchers started to tire. They felt overwhelmed with demand and had no time for workshops, or to expand to other topics, or, you know, to even do their research, which is their day job. They were, in fact, starting to feel pretty glum. But one day, the researcher met up with other researchers and they realised they all had the same problem. Suddenly, one of the researchers cried,
"I've got an idea! Let's combine forces!"
And so the researchers set up a cooperative. By working together, they were able to bring their workshops to bigger groups with less effort and were able to expand into new topics. Excitedly, the cooperative exclaimed,
"We can do more and we will do more!"
Soon, word got out that these workshops were pretty good, and more people came knocking at their door. That's the last prompt story. The researchers had found themselves stuck in a bit of a cycle. How could they keep up with demand for training? How could they keep up with new topics? They could do more, but should they do more? This is a true story. It's the conundrum that we currently find ourselves in with our National Bioinformatics Cooperative, where we've been working together with other training providers across the country to deliver a national program of bioinformatics training. The model has been a great success when we've used it to bring a greater variety of bioinformatics training to more people nationally. Even more importantly, we are learning from each other within this cooperative, and we really like working together, and we do want to do more. But we seem to have reached a peak in the number of live workshops and events that we can offer. Our trainers have no more time for training and have other commitments and demands on their time. So recently, I've been wondering, is doing less the answer? How do you balance demand and capacity? Are workshops the only way? And are there more efficient ways of getting training to everyone? I'm going to leave you with these questions, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on how we can tackle these problems later on.
Thanks, Melissa and Christina. Gotta find my spot. Okay, our next speaker is Dr. Giorgia Mori from Sydney Informatics Hub. Over to you.
I'm already regretting having animations on my slides. Does this work? The big one? Okay, I'll try. Anyway, hello everyone. My name is Giorgia, and I recently joined the Sydney Informatics Hub as a data science trainer. For the topic for today, I'm new to the group, so I had to go around and have a chat with my colleagues. I collected experiences, and today I'm going to present you a couple of mini case studies of what I think are the best examples of different kind of industry engagement for training development. The organizations involved in these studies are NVIDIA and the Petroleum Exploration Society of Australia. In the first case with NVIDIA, the opportunity presented because ICT purchased $1 million of GPUs from them. So SIH reached out to them, and they asked them to run a training workshop on how to effectively use them. In the second case with PISA, SIH ran a Python for Geoscience workshop at a conference. So SIH was approached not only by PISA, but also from other organizations for running a bespoke version of that same workshop. Some insights from both these cases. With PISA, this specific case led to a lot of researcher connections and various grants. For the first case, I think it's important to highlight that big tech companies are interested in continuous engagement with research, and a good example is the NVIDIA Deep Learning Institute University Ambassador Program, where you can get actually certified for teaching NVIDIA workshops to universities. Both these kind of trainings have had successful outcomes. Further ongoing collaborations beyond the single training, improved reputation and visibility for both the industry and the university, and of course opportunities to upskill both employees and researchers. I have some practical considerations based on the experiences from my colleague in engaging with industry for the development of these trainings. We need to take in consideration differences in disciplines and knowledge levels among the participants so that we can build as much flexibility and customizations in our training as is feasible and manageable. There might be unrealistic expectations on training content and delivery format, and I think it's our job to try and manage and address these expectations. And we know researchers and we know how to develop a training that will meet their learning needs. And I finish this saying that I think universities and industry are natural partners for bridging the skills gap, as we both have a huge amount to gain from each other, and by working closely and constructively with each other. And from the university side, we can do a lot to fill the skill gap, but we cannot do it without a strong industry partnership. And this partnership will work if there is clarity about the purpose of the partnership, and also we are willing to spend time on it and making it work. And that's all for me.
Thanks, Giorgia. Now, the last lightning talk is Anne Backhaus. And I missed saying George's, and I think I missed Nisha's first one as well, so sorry to both of you. But Anne is going to talk about skills pathways for developing the research workforce, status quo, or let's get creative. And I don't know if you kept that title.
I did. Oh, you did. Keep it. Okay, so hello, I'm Anne Backhaus. I'm with the PASI Supercomputing Research Centre in Perth, Western Australia. So, similar to Melissa, I'm starting with a story. So a few years ago, we decided to hike one of the passes in the Accursed Mountains in Albania. We were cautioned to stay on the path because of some uncleared landmines that were kind of off path because of the conflict in the 90s. So we started out fine. On the trail, we recognized the markers, a little bit different, but we could see them. But somewhere along the line, we went off the path. We scrambled over boulders, we slipped down small drops, we were grabbing onto tree roots. In short, it wasn't pretty. By the end of the day, however, we made it back down to hike another day. So what does this story about the Albanian Alps have to do with a skills pathway? In a word, I think lots. Do we provide a pathway for our learners, or do we provide a lot of training, a wilderness, with little or no guidance and no markers or flow of the path that the users need to get through the training? So in context of PASI, we provide a lot of materials. We have search functionality, so if you know the topic, you can search on it. We provide a wilderness, which when I looked at the landscape of supercomputing centers globally, is pretty much the status quo. It doesn't minimalize what we offer, We offer a variety of skills, upskilling, face-to-face, hybrid, online, long courses, short trainings. We record sessions, we chop them up, we make them modular. We try to do all the right things. And we provide a bit of guidance in the titles of the trainings, like core training or advanced training. And all of that is good. But it's minimal if you really think about it in terms of guidance for somebody new, especially. We provide content and modality variety to not only PASI users, but also when we reach out to secondary and tertiary. So while we offer content, I feel that we have a disjointed pathway, especially for somebody new. To move away from the status quo of training offering towards the creatives, as they're called, or we're calling them, we've started to put together roadmaps or learning pathways. Our approach is simplistic right now, but we plan to build out more robust pathways this year. Surprise, Fatima, we've got some of our work cut out. We want to focus on identifying and guiding our users into and through the skills and knowledge they need to do their research. No more, no less. And we want to provide a selection of on-ramps and off-ramps. There we go. The naming conventions of status quo and creative is fraught because what I may call status quo, you may call creative, and vice versa. But for point of discussion, I'm using them here. I'd like to now highlight a couple of programs that we consider creatives and that have been particularly successful. In both instances, the approach within the training, within these, is a guided path or a guided experience. For users, we started a program called Mentored Sprints. It's a 5-week from start to finish program with the core programming sprint at week 4. The preparation and planning before is critical for success. This differs from a hackathon in that it's bespoke to the project and to the group with their software stack and their particular programming challenges that they want, but yet it has a flavor of a hackathon. Participants said that they've carved off months of development time through that 1-week sprint. In the tertiary area, we run an annual 10-week program, a paid internship program. So with the introduction, we stayed at about 12 interns per year until we introduced co-funding. Then we bumped it up to 35 to 45 interns every year. And with that growth, we then needed a new way to support that. So we introduced intern mentors who were selected from the intern alum from previous years. And it's worked really well. Today, the intern mentors, guided by Fatima, are leading their final intern showcase. It's going on right now as we speak. The showcase attracts not only the projects, but it attracts the public and it attracts industry who are interested in hiring the interns. So it's become quite successful. In closing, these are some of the questions that drive me to be creative, to help me step outside and away from the status quo. I'll finish with one for you. What questions drive you to be creative? Thank you.